UFOs, monsters, mysteries. You're listening to Talking Weird. And now, from a cabin deep in the Northwoods, your hosts, Dr. Dean Bertram and Jenn Durrell.
Well, hey, baby.
Hey, baby.
I blew the intro timing.
I was going to say, maybe I should have done it because you were asking me if I wanted to do it. And I'm like, oops. I saw me for a split second.
Yeah, I saw me too. I'm like, oh, my goodness. Well, the great news is we have a slightly different setup where we're moving next week. Like the intros are different, so we shouldn't run into that problem. And, of course, we're about to move to the Untold Radio Network, which is the brainchild of Doug Hajicek, the iconic and legendary creator / producer of one of my all-time favorite shows, MonsterQuest. So next, for those of you watching and listening, whether you're watching this live or whether you stumble upon it in weeks or years to come, and you wonder why there's no more episodes on the Talking Weird channel, you have to go to Untold Radio Network to find us as of next week. And you can find all the links to the Untold Radio Facebook, the Untold Radio YouTube, the Untold Radio Twitter, where it'll be streaming on all those platforms in the show notes attached to this episode on Facebook and YouTube. Are you excited?
I'm excited, yes.
I'm excited we made it past 100, an actual 100 episodes. We passed it, I think, a few weeks ago, but I thought it would be fun to save it for our final one to talk about, at least our final episode on this platform.
Yeah. I always wondered how many episodes we had. I figured it was up there, but I wasn't sure.
I think it's about 104 or something now, maybe a little more. Something in that vicinity. And we're talking to because we're stacked up already with guests. We're pre-booked for after the move for several episodes now. So we probably should engage a little bit more with all those wonderful people who've been watching us for so long. Hey, Ken, and hey to the third baby,
yes,
Ed Schultz.
Hey, Ed.
And thank you. Ken reminded me it is a different time.
Yes.
We're moving. We play at the moment, or we live stream every Saturday at 11 p.m. Central. As of next week, it will be still Saturday and only a little earlier, but still an hour earlier. So 10 p.m. Central. And hopefully that will make it easier upon some of the people in Eastern time zones. Because we've had a few people over the years, in fact, several go, why don't you start a little earlier? We listened.
Yeah.
And we are. Yeah. So if you're listening and watching tonight, let Jen and I know the guests that you've really enjoyed over the course of the last couple of years. Like, is there people you'd like to see us get on again? Are there people we've never had on and you're like, why don't they have this guy or gal on? Let us know. Because we'd love to make sure that you get to see some of the guests you enjoy. We've had some amazing guests. Who are some of your we won't say favorites, but who are some of the guests you really remember? What are some of the standout episodes for you?
Well, some of the very first ones, it was a big deal for me, was when we had Greg Newkirk and Pfeiffer on but that's because we did that at the fest, though. So that was a pretty
Midwest Weird Fest.
Yeah.
I think that was episode. Wasn't that episode? Yeah, we had them in person in studio.
Yeah, it's the only one I think we had in person.
At this wonderful little podcast studio across the road from the Micon Downtown Cinema called Ivy Creatives. They've since moved, that wonderful creative co-op. But it was wonderful to sit in studio and record it with them live. Mind you, then we were still just an audio show. We didn't do video then. But you can still listen to that episode. It's still both at talkingweird.com. And if you scroll all the way back to almost the beginning of the Talking Weird playlist or the Talking Weird video list on YouTube, you'll find it. I think it was number 3, number 4, something like that. Very
4,
early.
I think it was 4.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Somewhere around.
I have to go back and look.
And we did another one of your favorite paranormal investigator TV stars back then too. We did Dakota Layden fairly early on.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
I think was a good one. I think Dakota's probably coming back when Destination Fear launches into season. Is it season? What are they up to 4? Now? Season 4. I think then Dakota will come back on. Hopefully, I have talked to him about it.
Yeah.
So We'll get him back.
That'll be good.
That'll be awesome.
Yeah, we'll actually get to see him.
Yeah, we'll do video because last time again we were still
Yeah.
audio with him as well.
Mm-hmm.
Who else would you like to get on again off the top of your head?
Well, I would think it would be fun to get Greg and Dana on, just because I really like those two.
Down in Newkirk. Yeah, we should. We haven't had them on the video thing yet. We definitely should. That'd be a blast. We have coming up, I know, two of your previous favorite guests as well, and that's Kendall and Vera Welpton from House in Between Films and from Sleepless Unrest. And what was the show they met on? You're more au fait with ghost shows. Was it Ghost Adventures or Ghost Adventures Academy?
No, it was Ghost Hunters. I get
confused. All these ghost shows.
Yeah.
I think that's where they met, right?
Was it? Yeah. Was it? Did he mention that he was the film, and maybe she was the Ghost Hunters Academy?
Yeah, maybe she was on-screen talent, and he was like a camera guy or something. I'm not sure. I had to watch enough of those shows to know. Not that I have anything against them.
That was the beginning. That's where they met, through Ghost Hunters. Yeah.
And hey, Joe, one of our
Hey,
long-time listeners, thank you for joining us on the very last Talking Weird on this platform. Not the very last Talking Weird. We'll be on Untold Radio next week for anybody who's just tuned in now. So now I'm trying to, there's so many guests. There's so many people I'd love to have back on again. I talked to Lyle Blackburn recently, who's I've always loved talking to. I think he's in the middle of a move at the moment, but I think we'll have him on sometime in the nearish future. Like I said, we're booked a little ways ahead. We've had one of my favorite all-time guests is Joshua Kuchin, and we've got him joining us again, I think October 22. Is that what the Saturday night is in October? Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, so he'll be back to talk about his new 2-volume series, Ecology of Souls, which will be fantastic.
Yeah.
And other things. I mean, with Joshua, you can't help but go down all kinds of fantastic byways and rabbit holes. I was trying not to use the rabbit hole. It's so overused. I'm like, what can I use? Dark byway or something. So anybody out there, let us know what guests you've dug so far you'd like us to have on again, because we want to be able to chat to you tonight, because for the next few episodes we'll still be taking comments and questions, but we probably won't be able to stop mid-show and say, oh, hi Joe, or hi Ed, if the message comes along later. Well, we'll still talk to you, we'll still bring up the messages and everything, but on shows like this where it's just you and me, we can talk more.
It's much easier.
And unfortunately, not unfortunately, wonderfully, we have the next number of shows booked with guests where we won't be able to just chat unless it's asking a question that you ask for the guest. Oh, okay, excellent. Horace Smith, who wrote the wonderful book Willimantic Skies, and is Professor Emeritus of Physics and Astronomy at I think Michigan State University. Yeah, I asked him the other day, could you come on? Because he's just a powerhouse of knowledge of not just physics and astronomy, but he knows an incredible amount about the history of UFOs and the like. So I thought it'd be fun to talk with a hardcore, proper, genuine astronomer about the UFO phenomenon.
Oh, yeah.
So hopefully he'll be another guest sometime in the next 2 to 3 months, I would think. And Joe kindly said we understand. And yeah, sometimes we'll still have to do a show where it's just you and me so we can connect properly and talk more to folks. But please still ask questions. We'll still be responding to you in the question and comment section. But don't stop commenting if we're not actually stopping to talk to you. We'll always put questions on screen. We love it when you guys ask questions for the guests, because some of the stuff that you guys think of, we don't think of. And it's like, wow, that's a great question from Joe or from Ed or from Ken or from Mothman 46 or from David or, any of you regular loyal listeners. I still haven't heard any of you suggest somebody tonight, though, that you'd like us to have on or like us to have on again. Or even if you don't want us to have somebody on again, maybe you can say, well, that was an interesting episode with that guest. My goodness, they were crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't think of many crazy guests we've had on. They've all been pretty lovely.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't think we have any real guest horror stories. I know some shows do, because I've talked to people who have guest horror stories.
Yeah, I can't think of any. Everybody's been real nice, and
yeah, it's been a great run so far. So who have we got next week? Our first guest, which is going to be a lot of fun because in fact, I think you, Jen, suggested getting him on like some time ago. And that's Jay Bachochin, who's the director of Finding Jay, and he has his new documentary, I think, drops on Monday, which is Beyond the Kettle, Finding Jay 2. And I believe you can watch that on Vimeo. I don't think it's going to be out straight away on Amazon or other platforms. I think Finding Jay is. I think you can find Finding Jay on other platforms, but his new one first drops on Vimeo. So if you want to check that out before the show, you can watch it as of this Monday. And he'll be our very first guest at the new in our new home at Untold Radio Network. I'm looking really forward to chatting to him.
Yeah, me too. So what are you looking at? I just saw the screen pop up.
I was just I just wanted to make sure I got the title.
Your face, right?
I just wanted to make sure I got the title of Jay's new film. I knew it was Finding Jay 2, but I was like, what's the actual, before the subtitle? So I was pulling up things to look to make sure I got it right. Just recently heard that NASA wrote Steven Spielberg a 20-page letter telling him why he should not release Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I wonder why. I haven't heard that story. I have heard other strange stories about Spielberg's relationship with the government at the time. Supposedly, I think, I don't know if it was a press release from the White House or if it was somewhere, it was released at some stage anyway, that he and Jimmy Carter had never met. Carter was, the president back then. It was just before Reagan, I think. And then later a photo surfaced where there's a photo of Spielberg and Carter talking, and I think Carter even sent it to Spielberg with a letter saying something like, thought you would like this photo, or the White House sent it. So he certainly was talking to the government more than perhaps is portrayed. And what's Robbie Graham's book, like Sources of the Silver Screen or Silver Screen Sources or something? That book's loaded with the relationships between the intelligence agencies and military intelligence and Hollywood. And there was another book back in the day as well. I'm trying to remember what it was called. Another book that dealt with that topic. Robbie Graham's book's a little newer, but the idea that Hollywood has had a very close relationship with the CIA and other alphabet soup organizations. And as a result, perhaps even some of the extraterrestrial messages we got, when I say messages, I mean the way they're portrayed in science fiction may have been played with a little bit by, government intel, or how they injected. And there's so many stories. I mean, we could talk about the actual, the tales of the way these movies have represented UFO reality, or the way we think about UFOs. It's pretty extensive. In fact, it's almost impossible to talk about the history of UFO belief without talking about the representation of UFOs and aliens on the silver screen and in, on television and in comic books and pulp fiction and pulp literature, So I think there's a good, to Ed's point, who knows why NASA said that, but I'm not at all surprised that there might have been some, back and forth messaging. Mothman 46 says NASA stands for never a straight answer. Well, there's that too. Of course, also speaking about Close Encounters of the Third Kind, of course, it ends with that scene where the Richard Dreyfuss character, or the actor Richard Dreyfuss, he plays a character Neary, finally gets into the secret UFO landing base and becomes one of the astronauts sent away with the ETs, and the ETs, in I guess popular UFO belief left people behind here. But that became the ending of Close Encounters of the Third Kind is almost identical to the Project Serpo story, which came out a number of years later. And some people have, in fact, Mirage Men, I believe the documentary says that Richard Doty was the person who launched a lot of that information. Richard Doty denies launching that information, but certainly, speaking of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, some have suggested it's an actual, I suppose, screen representation of a genuine exchange program between the US military or the US intelligence agencies and the extraterrestrials. Then again, that might just have been invented by Richard Doty, according to Mirage Men. I know Richard was involved in the dialogue, but I think when we had him on, he said, no, he didn't start it, but he chimed in when people were chatting about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Doty was a great
Yes.
guest. I really enjoyed, speaking of guests, I really enjoyed talking to Richard Doty.
Mhm.
Did you see the other day? I was watching a podcast, and Richard Doty is, I don't know if he's doing the circuit, might be unkind because I've only seen one. He's only done one, where he talked about a Sasquatch
No,
experience, a Sasquatch encounter that he had with, I think, with his brother and his father or something. Like
interesting.
a Bigfoot sighting. I'm like, I had no idea Richard Doty had a Sasquatch
Yeah, we never
encounter.
did ask that type of question either. So
We were just asking about the UFO cover-up type
Yeah.
stuff, which is the obvious
Mhm.
questions to ask Richard Doty.
yeah, so that's pretty interesting. Yep.
And so Joe Fox says, honestly, in our time here on the plane, it's been an astounding time to be in our time here on this planet, maybe,
Mhm.
it's been an astounding time to be alive while listening and learning about UFOs. Very interesting. It is interesting. There's all kinds of, at the moment, as we know, different hints of disclosure and different ideas about what the government does and doesn't know. And certainly from the Tic Tac video release onwards through, Department of Defense,
Yeah.
I suppose, reorganizing regarding how they handle supposedly UFO reports to the recent hearings in Washington. It seems like it hasn't been as front and center on the minds of the government, or at least not openly, since before the Condon Committee, going back to like the mid to late 1960s. It hasn't been taken this seriously, I think, by any arm of the government, again, openly, or by the media. So we are living in interesting times now, Joe, as far as UFO reality.
Mhm.
I don't know what your thoughts are on that, baby. Are you conscious of the
I
change?
totally I totally agree. I mean, a lot of things have changed, not just with that, just paranormal. The whole gamut, all of it.
Well,
It's
the
more prevalent,
paranormal.
more people talk about
Yeah.
it. So
Well, the TV output for paranormal content in the last
Oh,
decade has
gosh.
just gone through the roof.
yeah. hmm
I mean, when
Especially all of the demonic, like you go on YouTube. I watch a lot of that. So most of them always have the most haunted house in America, or I saw a demon. That's just how they have all the thumbnails. And when you watch it, there's probably maybe a mention of that, but it's nothing like what they put up there. But that they've got to kind of sell it so that way somebody will click on it. But that's just how that is, I guess.
Well, I think that's the same for all YouTube videos. Everybody who wants
Yeah,
to
I guess so.
grow their channel.
But maybe not just YouTube. I mean, it's just I've noticed that. I mean, that's what their thumbnails, but I've noticed that throughout a lot of the stuff that you see anymore with paranormal, at least with spirits and ghosts and entities. They, tend to go to that side because they'll get more views that way.
Well, you've got to be, yes, I suppose, exploitative. I mean, that's the history of B
Yeah.
cinema. Even you've got to exploit the elements you have to make them seem more
Yeah.
exciting, to get
Mhm.
eyes on your product. But yeah, when I was a kid, paranormal television, there was like In Search of the Leonard Nimoy vehicle, which in Australia I think was rebranded Great Mysteries of the Universe or Great Mysteries of the World or something. I watched that all the time as a kid. And there was That's Incredible, which was more of a show of all kinds of strange stuff, but occasionally I think they'd squeeze a paranormal story in there. I mean, I obviously can remember science fiction, and I can remember other fictional tales of the paranormal, but I can't remember any other paranormal TV content when I was a kid, other than
Tales of the Crypt, which I loved.
well, that was a horror content.
That's
though,
different.
Right? Like,
That's different, though.
Yeah. No, in the 70s and early 80s, can anyone else remember other paranormal content? There was a show, it might even have been called Blue Book, which before the current Blue Book, it was called, or maybe it was called like, I don't know, Project Saucer or something. I can't even remember now. But it kind of was a fictionalization of famous UFO reports, and they tried to present it as factual, but it certainly wasn't. It wasn't like an Unsolved Mysteries or something. It was like, shot like a traditional narrative. But I think the lead in and the lead out was that it was based on a true case. And Joe Fox said, Leonard got me started. And that show was the best. Ed Schultz says One Step Beyond. I think he might have mentioned that before. Whenever I hear One Step Beyond, all I can think of is the Madness song from my favorite British band, One Step Beyond, one of their first singles. But yeah, I think Ed mentioned that before. I've still got to check.
Go ahead and sing it.
I don't. Well, will that like get us? You're saying you're telling me I can sing it because you know have such a horrible voice. Yeah, YouTube will never pick it up on it. No, well, if I sang well, I might break some copyright violation. They might remove me.
That's true.
The algorithm will never be able to find it in my tone-deaf voice. And I know how much you love my singing voice, not baby. You just want to make a mockery of me in front of our audience tonight. I would totally do it if I didn't think the algorithm might bounce me. Here's something interesting that Horace Smith said regarding, just to rewind a minute to the letter to Spielberg that Ed Schultz brought up. I've seen rumors of the NASA letter to Spielberg, but I don't recall any letter being made public. So there you go. So Joe said One Step Beyond, and Ed said supposed to be based on actual events. Okay, so it might have been one of those shows like the old Blue Book type show, which, ran with an idea and fictionalized it to a degree. But as far as the regular documentary or investigation-y type shows, there was nothing back in the day except the wonderful In Search of course. But I'm serious. That's all I can remember because I was into all of and it's weird too because the 70s and I guess from probably the late 60s before I was born, but throughout the 70s into the early 80s, there was a real occult zeitgeist. Like people were fascinated with, palmistry and tarot and the occult and UFOs and New Age ideas and, Bigfoot. So it's kind of weird that there wasn't more of a response from television. Also, of course, then there wasn't cable. There wasn't all these options for a channel like Discovery or Travel to just have paranormal doco after paranormal doco.
Yeah.
And I don't think, but at that stage too, I don't think television producers had worked out how you could make such a cheap reality TV type show. I think that's one of the things that's driven the popularity in paranormal television as well. It's much cheaper to make any of these ghost hunting shows than it is to make an episode of the X-Files, which is like the budget of a motion picture, a real movie for one episode of something like the X-Files. But if you do a show where 3 investigators go out to the desert and film a military base or something, and, you cut to a few talking heads throughout and some stock footage, it's pennies on the dollar. So I think that drove it as well. Well, if you look at the old In Search ofs, they were shot on, genuine 35mm film. It's why they look so awesome. Yeah. They were traveling all over the world with camera crews, and it was like, it was a big production, very different to the way most of these things are made today. Yeah. Oh, and so Joe Fox says Ed Schultz says One Step was a 50s, 60s TV show. Oh. And Ed Schultz agreed regarding the occult explosion of the 70s. Oh, I don't know if this was a thing or not. Psychic discoveries behind the Iron Curtain. I know there was an interest in what was going on in Russia, but I don't know if that's Ed. Is that a reference to a book or a show or something? I'm not sure. And Joe agrees that it was very limited in the 70s and 80s. I still remember the book about astral projection I picked up when I was 16. After reading, I was truly scared. Oh. There was certainly a boom in the literature. There was a lot of books on Bigfoot and UFOs and, the occult and astrology. They were everywhere.
Comic books.
Well, comic books as well as just books. Like I'm about to also start a show on Untold Radio Network. This Tuesday we go live for the first time with Jason McLean. And the first episode we're doing, because it's called Mysterious Library, kind of like my old My Weird Library show. But it's both of us talking about a book instead of me just talking to the camera. The first one we're doing is Chariots of the Gods. It was Jason's idea. It's a great idea because that book was so influential. Mind you, as we'll talk about, there was a lot of writers and authors and thinkers saying similar things before Eric von Daniken. But why I bring that up now, talking about the occult explosion, is as a kid, actually, I went to see Chariots of the Gods on the big screen as well, which goes to show how prevalent it was. And I was only a boy, but you couldn't go into somebody's house that I can remember, because I'd always look at bookshelves. I've always been obsessed with books since I was little, and not see a copy of Chariots of the Gods. It wasn't like your average UFO book back then. Not everybody would have had a copy of what else would have been a big seller. I don't know. The Interrupted Journey by John Fuller, or one of Donald Kehoe's early books, or one of Adamski's books. But everywhere you went, Chariots of the Gods was on the bookshelf. I know it was on the shelf in my home, and my parents weren't particularly into the occult or weirdness or anything, but there was a copy there. So my point is, that was when these things started to be, very prevalent, very prominent, these ideas.
I didn't have any of that in my house.
Oh, well. And your dad was a librarian. He mustn't have wanted to read the pulp stuff. He must have wanted the real books.
Nah, he likes more fictional, not fictional, like autobiographies. He's more into history and stuff like that, but he's not into any supernatural stuff. Not really. Philosophy.
Well, that's it. Sometimes
it's kind of that's probably the further he goes is philosophy. And
well, speaking of Chariots of the Gods and philosophy, you can't even talk about Chariots of the Gods seriously and not talk about Plato's mention of Atlantis initially. That's where it all comes from, this idea of an ancient civilization that was advanced and collapsed and left traces of the culture behind. You can trace the idea of ancient extraterrestrials to the idea of ancient Atlanteans. And Ed Schultz said Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain was a book, a classics illustrated comic book about the paranormal since 1960. And Joe says, I have a whole series of small paperbacks somewhere about Edward Casey and his readings. That's absolutely another one of those popular books you saw everywhere. Casey was massive back then as well. I mean, he was big beforehand, but there was kind of this rebirth, and I think the idea of the sleeping prophet, and there was with Nostradamus, there was a whole rebirth of interest in prophecy in the 70s as well. That's for sure. What was your first paranormal book? Can you remember?
Goodness. My first paranormal book?
Yeah.
I guess the first one would have been when I was a teenager, and that was Whitley Strieber's Communion. Mm-hmm.
That was another one of those books which extended far beyond the usual, interest in paranormal. It was, it went to the top of the New York Times bestseller list. It was everywhere too. Yeah. I remember long before I read Communion, I remember seeing the posters advertising Communion, like on bus shelters and things. Like they used to always advertise movies and books and other things on bus shelters.
The one where the alien, you see half of his eye when he's peeking out from the bookshelf.
Oh no, I just meant the original one, which is the full alien head. The original cover. Yeah,
yes. I have that one, but I've also seen posters where it's that image, because that was always something that was just kind of embedded in people's mind. I know it was embedded in mine after I saw it, because I had my own weird stuff going on when I was younger. So just seeing that was just like a bit much for me.
I think Communion. I think the cover of that book and the prominence of that artwork, both on the covers of the books itself, as well as it was splayed across magazines because it was a best-selling book, and there were advertisements for it everywhere. I think that has an awful lot to do with the way the grey extraterrestrial entered or bloomed in the mythological consciousness of folks.
Well, yeah, I think around then, because everybody had pretty much forgotten about Roswell, I think. It wasn't as prevalent. Once that came about, then you saw that. And then I think I remember also, maybe it was in the 90s, they came up with that videotape of the alien autopsy.
Yeah, the alien autopsy, and Fox played it, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. I remember renting that, thinking, I wonder if it's real or not. And I watched it with my brother. We're just glued to the TV, just trying to see if it was real. We're like, there's no way that's real. But we still wanted to watch it just to see, just in case.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Roswell as well, because you're right. They both became prevalent again in the 80s.
Yeah.
Roswell became prevalent because of the book by Charles Berlitz and by William Moore about the I can't even remember what it was called, like UFO. I don't think it was called UFO crash at Roswell. I think it was called the Roswell incident. That was the first time it had garnered that kind of attention again. It also, funnily enough, around the same period, was on an episode of In Search Of. And so this is kind of, in the late 70s, early 80s when it reemerges. And of course, Strieber's Communion, I think, hits the bestseller lists in about 1986. So there was that window where, what would become X-Files mythology
Oh yeah.
started to become came to, I guess, grab people's attention again. The Roswell, repopularization, and then the alien abduction books. Now, there'd been stories about UFO crashes since the beginning of the modern phenomenon, since, post World War II years. And there had, of course, been the abduction phenomenon had been popularized since the 60s with Betty and Barney Hill's story in the John Fuller book Interrupted Journey, and then there was a TV adaptation of that, and then there were all these other abductions, of course, in the meantime, the Travis Walton abduction and the Pascagoula abduction.
Fire in the Sky.
And Betty Andreasson. I wish that, and actually Andreasson's book might have come out after Communion anyway, but there was certainly that book Communion. Bud Hopkins, to a lesser extent, his book, which came out around the same time, which I think was that Intruders, which was also wasn't quite as successful as Strebus, but was still successful. And that Roswell reimagining pretty much set the stage for where UFO belief would go for the next couple of decades. Now, I saw a message here from Horace we might pull up. It said there was no Amazon, of course, in the 1960s, but many paperbacks featured on store racks. I even remember it in the 70s and 80s. A few hardbound books, such as Flying Saucers Serious Business, sold well in department stores. That's interesting. And Ed mentioned that there is a river, the Edgar Cayce story by Thomas. Can't read that last name. I need my glasses. Cigarette. Anyway, that's obviously a biography, which sounds interesting.
Let's not date ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I already have. Shane Edwards did a little alien face. Joe Fox said, I discovered you guys late in life. Showing the guests have been awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Maybe I've gone a little higher. Hang on, here's one. We'll read a big one from Ed. I recall seeing a documentary on UFOs around 1960. I was 11 years old, became a believer. It mentioned NICAP and Kehoe. I joined NICAP. That's right. I forgot Ed was a member of NICAP. I joined NICAP by using money I received as a gift on my confirmation. Not sure if that was money well spent or poorly spent. We just actually pre-recorded another interview because one of the guests coming up has a pretty busy schedule and they weren't able to do it when we wanted them in a couple of weeks. So we pre-recorded. But in the post-show conversations, which are always fun, we were talking about how organizations like NICAP and now to the Stars Academy and, on and on. And we were talking about, obviously, the Benowitz affair and Richard Doty being an AFOSI agent. We were talking about how much of UFO belief is kind of controlled or handled or disseminated by either military or ex-military or intelligence or ex-intelligence. So it becomes very difficult to determine what is or isn't spin. And NICAP's in a way where you really see that for the first time, because I think the board of NICAP had ex-CIA directors and ex-generals or admirals on it. It was fairly... It looked like, if I wanted to have somebody controlling the spin, I'd put these guys on it. So who knows? I don't know. And Joe said Edgar, not Edward. Sorry. And Joe also said Ed is a true buff, and then Ed adds, in 6th grade I did a science project on UFOs based on the doco I mentioned. Everyone thought I was nuts.
Yeah.
It was a different time then. I think you could probably do a science project now about UFOs, and you'd be easily accepted. Ed used to love reading the NICAP's UFO Investigator newsletter. Yeah, so that was. I think in many ways it was a more interesting time in ufology back then. I think Joe's right that today we live in this, super conscious of UFOs period again because of everything that's gone on since the Tic Tac videos. But there was a period back then, before the Condon Committee and before, in a way, Blue Book shut. And there was a real idea from, I guess, the late 40s up to the late 60s that there was a mystery there which could be solved. And, we mightn't have known what it was yet. Like there were some people clearly said they knew what it was, extraterrestrials from another planet, whatever else. But there was people like Jacques Vallée, who were really beginning to think about other interpretations. There were people like obviously John Keel, even Alan Hynek himself. There was a lot of potential for where I think UFO research could go, and I think it kind of got bogged down in the quagmire of all that type of spin we're talking about, the idea of this UFO mythology, kind of which the X-Files drew from, all this conspiracy and weird dealings and US government and aliens having some kind of allegiance and underground bases and abduction programs which were taking millions of Americans for some type of breeding program. It just got crazy. It didn't, when you go back and read some of the earlier literature, especially by people I mentioned like Vallée or Gordon Crichton or Charles Bowen, any of those people, it didn't. Amy Michel, the great French ufologist, another great French ufologist, it seemed like there was still an attempt to get to the heart of the mystery. Maybe we're getting it again now, but now it seems to be everybody thinks the solution is to put pressure on the US government to tell us what they know. As Vallée suggested a long time ago, maybe the US government don't know anything. Maybe that's the conspiracy, that they don't want us to know they don't know anything, because then it looks like, there's a weakness there. So pretend we know about the Space Brothers and we have crash sources and everything else. And that might, well,
I think they know something.
Yeah, they know they don't know. I don't know. I mean, this is all speculation. Everything I ever say about this stuff's speculation, but anything anybody says about a lot of this is speculation,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, Joe Fox just said I still eat 4 absolutely raw almonds a day like Edgar Casey recommended. It cost a lot of damn money for raw almonds.
Yeah.
It
Especially
says,
nowadays.
Ed said he also sent away for a copy of the Air Force Regulation 200-2 report regarding UFOs. And Joe Fox says he's not kidding either. Well, if it's healthy for you, Joe, you can't put a price on one's health. Better to spend it on almonds than, I don't know, cigarettes or something.
They're good for you.
Cigarettes or almonds?
Almonds.
I quit smoking long ago. I enjoyed cigarettes occasionally. Yeah, I quit long time ago.
It was too cool when we were younger, so it was more peer pressure than anything.
Yeah, in the 80s and 90s, how couldn't you have a cigarette with your friends?
Everybody smoked.
Yeah. It's funny, I remember when I first started working, and this dates me a little bit as well, when I first started working at the Australian equivalent of Walmart, when I was doing my college degree, I'd work there nights. You could still smoke in the lunchroom, and you could still smoke on the floor. Normal workers couldn't smoke on the floor, but like the management still smoked on the floor, and people and customers were still smoking in the store. And I remember one of my professors who actually ended up becoming, I guess, one of my PhD supervisors, but I'd had him going back to my BA days. In his office, when you went in for a meeting, he'd be smoking in his office. Can you imagine being in a university today and you walk in and your professor's like smoking? It was a different world. This isn't the distant past. I'm not talking about like, those were the days. To me, it does, I guess, it never seems that long ago in your own lifetime, but different world.
Yeah.
Cigarettes were too expensive. Oh, hang on. I ticked on the wrong one. Hang on. Let's go to Ken first. Cigarettes were too expensive.
Yeah.
45 cents a pack. Back in the day. And Joe said, well, I was just going to say 4 almonds a day didn't cancel out 2 packs a day for 20 years. Well, maybe it canceled out some of that. Who knows?
Yeah.
So, well, what was your first? You said your first book exposure to the paranormal was Strieber's Communion, but what was your first pop culture exposure to it? Like, not counting books, when did you first become aware of like ghosts and spirits and those type of things? Can you remember?
Pop culture.
Well, maybe it was, I don't know, a TV show or a movie or, a radio program. I don't know.
Well, I really can't remember because, as I mentioned before, I've always had weird things happen since I was little. But I do remember my brother liked to force me to watch horror movies. But the only ones that really bothered me were the ones that seemed familiar to me. So I guess Poltergeist was a big one for me. But it was just movies. There wasn't much on TV nor was I allowed to watch it. So my brother would sneak it because he enjoyed scaring the crap out of me. So I'd watch it with him and then have nightmares for months. But Poltergeist was the one that really got me going.
Huh. Mothman 46 said congratulations on over 100 shows and the move to the new network. Thank you. And hopefully you'll come with us, Mothman 46, as hopefully everybody else will as well. Yeah, I think Poltergeist is one of those movies that, because it was packaged almost like a Spielberg movie, because listen, I really think Spielberg directed that movie. I know he just produced it, and supposedly Toby Hooper, the director of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, directed it. But if that's the case, then Spielberg exerted so much producerial control that you can't tell, because that movie feels like a Steven Spielberg movie. It looks like a Steven Spielberg movie. The little kid stuff's like a Steven Spielberg movie. The whole suburban kind of setup, it's like, it's like Close Encounters, but it becomes the, a haunted house one. It just feels like a Spielberg movie. And I think for that reason, a lot of kids watched it who probably shouldn't have, were too young. I've heard lots of people tell me that was their first scary film, or was the film that really bothered them when they were little. So there was something about that movie that really, tripped triggers in the young viewers at the time.
Mm-hmm. Well, I really liked Heather O'Rourke, which was, of course, was Carol Ann. So I became a big fan of hers. So every time they had a new Poltergeist, I always made sure that I watched it. And she was the same age as me when she made it. So I remember when I was 12 years old and we had just moved to, where I live now. And I remember getting the news that she had passed away. And it was heartbreaking for me because I felt so connected to her. So
I bet.
That's how much I liked the Poltergeist series.
Gosh. Yeah, film's going to have a big impact on us. Speaking of, Shane Edwards asks, what's your favorite movie about aliens or an alien? He liked Contact. I'll go first and I'll let you chime in. My favorite, probably, to be honest, it's probably Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I think it captures that feeling of mystery and high strangeness really well. I don't like the ending. I don't like the denouement, and Vallée didn't like the denouement either. Of course, there's an actual character in that movie based on Jacques Vallée, the character Lacombe, played by the French director Francois Truffaut, who's meant to be essentially Jacques Vallée. So Vallée, I think, did some kind of consultancy, and he certainly spoke to Spielberg, but he didn't like the finale, and I don't like the literalization of the finale either. I think it would have been, for me at least, I think it would have been a better movie if we never saw the obvious, ships land and the little, fairy-like ETs come out all happy. And, I think as powerful as the scene is with the music and everything, and I understand, as Spielberg obviously, did as well, being a master of cinema, knew he had to have that big Disney-esque ending as well. Don't forget, didn't the music riff on When You Wish Upon a Star? Like the
I heard something like that.
Yeah, I think I can't remember if they changed it or if it still does, but I know that was the point. So it was very much this big Disney-esque Hollywood ending. I love that movie. The other movie I love on the other side of the scale, as much as now Kevin Spacey's fallen, perhaps by all accounts rightfully into disgrace, is K-Pax. It's so great because it captures that. It does what I wish Close Encounters does. It captures that uncertainty of the fantastic. There's a literary critic, I won't go down this path too long, I don't want to bore people, but there's a literary critic called Todorov, and he formulated this theory that the type of movies we're talking about, as well as paranormal ones and, anything which is weird or wonderful, is a genre called the fantastic. And when you find it stays fantastic as long as you don't know what the creatures are you're dealing with. But if you find out, like at the end of a Scooby-Doo cartoon, that it's really just a man in a mask, scaring off those kids, or if you find out it's just a string of weird coincidences, then that becomes what's called the uncanny. It's explainable psychologically or, physically, it's explainable as our normal rational world. If it goes the other way, if it turns out there really are angels or extraterrestrials or ghosts, then it becomes marvelous. Now, it's a balancing act to stay in that space in fantastic where the audience don't know, and most films resolve at the end, whether it's natural or whether it's supernatural. But K-Pax is wonderful in that you can watch that movie and not be 100% sure whether Spacey's character really is what's called a walk-in, when an extraterrestrial takes over, the body that used to be a human's body, and whether he is just crazy at the end when he goes in that kind of stupor, or whether he really had an alien in him that left. And I think when you can do that, that's just awesome. I also like Mothman Prophecies because it's in a way somewhat similar. It doesn't resolve anything. There's still that Keelian sense of weirdness, even though that's not technically an alien movie. It's certainly part of the broader UFO mythology. What about you, baby? What's your favorite alien movie or movies?
Well, of course, the classic, as you mentioned, Spielberg movie, Close Encounter of the Third Kinds. Of course, that one's. I would be shocked if somebody didn't say that. But there's been a lot of good ones. I mean, of course, Communion stuck with me, and then Fire in the Sky, but that was just more because it was more visual with the faces and different aspects of them. But I really enjoyed M. Night Shyamalan's Signs. I still love that one. It's mostly based on the family and their struggles and their own story. But there was always a lesson to be learned, and the little girl was always leaving water out, and they never could understand why, but she was dealing with the grief of losing her mother. And then the aliens come and come to find out that's what ends up being I loved his movies.
It's a great ending to that movie. And Mel Gibson's fantastic in it.
Yeah. So that one's a good one. Another movie that I love, but it's not really alien-esque, but it has the whole paranormal feel, is an Interstellar. I can never say it right. It's a really long movie, but it's such a good movie, and it's a good movie to let you really think about life and all of the weird things that happen in our life and all the, because if anybody hasn't seen it, I won't say too much. But there's always a ghost in this little girl's room. She just figured there was a ghost in her room that was just knocking books off. And then, her dad's an astronaut and decides to go and save the world by, I don't want to say too much, but anyways, he ends up going through a black hole or something, or some type of, what do you call those? Not a black hole. It's a loop or worm or whatever.
Yeah, like a wormhole or something.
Yeah, something like that. And so when he goes into another time or another dimension, and it's just really neat because it ends up being her dad that's knocking those books over, trying to get her attention. It's just, I love stuff like that. A lot of people just don't think that way. So
it's nice to see sci-fi blend with something almost paranormal. That's why another movie I didn't mention, which of course I should mention, is 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah, that one's good. It's
a
theater.
It's presenting an alien intelligence in a non-traditional sci-fi, men in suits kind of trope. It's the idea that this black obelisk kind of evolves, is key to humankind's evolution, and then, not that I necessarily agree with any of this, but is key to humankind's evolution, and then pushes us onwards to the stars. And incidentally, that film came out around the same time as Erich von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods, and there's some very similar themes in the idea of extraterrestrials interfering with us from prehistory onwards. Nancy Malcolm mentioned Alien a minute ago, but she also mentioned I Love the Day the Earth Stood Still with Michael Rennie. It was such a love. It was as much a love story as a space story. Joe Fox liked Contact with Jodie Foster. Horace Smith mentioned one of my favorite old ones, Earth versus the Flying Saucers. Harryhausen's saucers were marvelous in that, the special effect artist who did it. And that book was based on a Donald Kehoe book. I'm trying to think what Kehoe book it was based on. I don't know. I don't think it was Flying Saucers Are Real. It might have been Flying Saucers from Outer Space. Maybe it was both of them. I don't know. But Kehoe was so horrified by that movie when it came out, because Kehoe was always against talking about occupant cases early on. That's something interesting in the history of UFOs. Respectable UFO investigators in the early days tended to dismiss any UFO sighting which involved people seeing UFO occupants, for one of the reasons being that people like George Adamski and the other contactees were having these almost spiritual experiences with ETs, and the more scientific investigators felt that muddied the waters, so then they essentially just avoided all contact stories. But of course, when Kehoe sees the adaptation of his book, and there's these saucer men with helmets on and on the ground and shooting shooting laser guns at people and the like. I can only imagine the conniption fit that poor old Kehoe went into.
Yeah.
So yeah, and Ken Rock says 2001 he'd seen as a little kid, but since I couldn't understand it, scared the heck out of me. I still won't watch it. It is kind of scary. It's a very Kubrick's probably maybe the most masterful cinematographer director ever. I mean, he's somebody who really understood how to frame things and how to light things, and that movie has a very, particularly when I suppose when they're in space and the views on the astronauts, and then towards the end where it becomes like a fever dream after Dave's gone through the I don't know what it is it a black hole or whatever he goes through at the end. I'm trying to remember. Does he go down to the gravity pool of Jupiter or something? I can't even remember. It's been probably over a decade since I watched it, but it's a very psychedelic, weird experience. It's super strange. And Kubrick really understands how to push people's buttons visually and with audio complementing it. Funnily enough, I watched 2001, which has, of course, a wonderful, who's the composer who's the classical, is it Strauss or is it anyway, it's a classical composition, the score. Again, it's been so long since I saw it. But I watched the whole movie with the volume down, and I played Angels and Airways Love double album. Like I just played the double album because they'd recently made a movie or produced a movie called Love, which was clearly riffing on 2001 a little bit about an astronaut, trapped in a space station. And I played their soundtrack to 2001, and my goodness, did it fit well. It was a very weird experience watching the movie on silent and listening to that movie, listening to that music when it came out.
I'm looking for a certain movie. I couldn't remember the name of it.
Starman's a great movie too. Mothman 46, the John Carpenter.
Yeah, I was getting ready.
Is that what you were looking for? Really?
That's what I found. I went, oh, but then I was like, that wasn't what I was looking for. But that's funny that he says it right when I was like all excited when I saw it. No, there's this other movie, and I can't remember the name of it, so I'm trying to find it.
You can look for a minute. I'll talk to the audience. Nancy says there was a movie about tiny UFOs that were born in the home of an elderly man and woman. Can't remember the name. No batteries included. I think it touched on the ETs.
Oh yeah, that's
being like fake. I haven't seen. I'm aware of it. I haven't seen it. That is really
good. That's really good.
I'll have to watch.
That was one of my favorites as a kid.
Shane said, "I can't believe no one said Spaceballs."
Spaceballs. Oh my god. Yes.
And Ed said, "Thus spoke Zarathustra." Thank you. That's right, Ed. Nancy,
Guardians of the Galaxy, but that's not really.
Nancy said, 2001. I warned against AI, but no one seemed to get the message. That's right, Hal. Hal was problematic to their survival, although they fixed that wicked computer. It's quite sad when they turn. It's kind of sad when they turn Hal off, though. Which is again the strength of Kubrick's, direction.
Darn it.
Nancy talked about Starman. Said Starman, red means stop, green means go, and yellow means go very fast. There must be a quote from Starman. I haven't seen it for so long. I remember the score, the Carpenter score too from Starman. It was just fantastic. But yeah, so anyway, I think what this proves, even though this is what we set out to do, is just how influential science fiction has been in our concept of extraterrestrial life, and how sometimes it coincides with what ufology talks about, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's more complicated. I like the ones which are a little more complicated. Again, that's why I would have preferred a more ambiguous ending to Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Yeah.
Mothman 46 also said batteries not included.
Mm-hmm.
What's the movie about? Pitch me the movie, and I might know what it is. I have a fair working knowledge on sci-fi, I think. What was it about? What happened in it that you're looking for?
It's a spaceship movie. And then there is a creature that gets inside the spaceship.
Alien?
Not that one.
Event Horizon? Is it Event Horizon? That's a fantastic movie.
Maybe.
I don't know if a creature gets in it or not. That was more like a spiritual.
Well, there's that, and I don't know which one it was. It might be this Prometheus, but I couldn't remember exactly if that's the same one.
Prometheus is like the prequel to Alien, right? So
Maybe.
no, it is. It's where it starts with the alien engineer kind of,
Well, yeah, I don't think it's the same one that I'm thinking of. That's what I meant by
Okay.
maybe.
Okay.
I'm sure I'll find it later. Otherwise, somebody's sitting here staring at this. Gosh.
Mothman 46 said Cocoon. Cocoon is a great movie. Very
Oh
much
my
an 80s
gosh,
feel-good
yes.
movie. Yeah. With
That was one of my favorites as a kid.
Steve Guttenberg. Who's is Kim Cattrall in that? I'm trying to think of the film.
Actually, one of the guys that's in Cocoon is in Batteries Included.
Is it
One of the older guys, the small older guy.
The guy with it. Oh, okay. I don't think Kim Cattrall is.
Oh, I forgot his name.
I think I'm thinking about Steve Guttenberg and her in Police Academy. But Steve Guttenberg was certainly in, I believe, Cocoon.
Darn it. Now I got to look it up.
You do have to look it up.
Mm-hmm. Batteries Included. So I'm just trying to figure out the actor's name because he was in that as well.
My mother just Facebooked me saying, I love Cocoon. That is a very nice movie.
It is.
And I don't think anybody's mentioned E.T.
E.T.?
E.T. the Extraterrestrial. Yeah, I adored that when I was a boy. I think that probably had, had a big role in introducing a generation to the belief in extraterrestrial, contact, and even introducing the terms. Do you know what I mean? It's the same as Close Encounters of the Third Kind introduced Hynek's classification system of Close Encounters of the First Kind. Even remember the trailer for Close Encounters of the Third Kind, I think had Close Encounters of the First Kind, and it explained what that was. Close Encounters of the Second Kind, and then it went up to Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So both that and E.T. did an awful lot to introduce the nomenclature of ufology into the popular consciousness of the day, that's for sure. Mothman 46 said Predator 1987. Joe said we're bringing up so many that we forgot about.
What about Gremlins? That was big.
I don't think Gremlins were aliens, though, were they?
They weren't?
I don't think so. Like the Mogwai or whatever. Like they're just some weird little being.
I figured they were alien-ishy, but maybe not.
I think doesn't look like the father gets it from
mutants.
Doesn't the father buy it when he's in, like, I don't know, he's a traveling salesman. I can't remember if he is in the Orient or whether he is in Chinatown or somewhere, but he buys the gremlin pet for his son for a Christmas present or something, right?
Okay.
Yeah, that's how it's introduced. I mean, maybe they are extraterrestrial, but I don't think it's ever suggested in the movie.
So the actor's name is Hume Cronin.
I don't know who he is. I don't think
you would know the face, but he's in Cocoon. But he's also one of the main characters in Batteries Not Included with Jessica Tandy as well.
Oh, I thought you were looking for that other movie. Nancy Malcolm.
I was, but that's going to take me a while.
E.T., like Star Wars, was a Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell's the famous person who spoke about the hero's journey. Critters might have been ETs. Were they ETs? That's a bit like Gremlins, isn't it? They might have been ETs. And there was what other weird 80s? There was Extro, but I don't know if Extro ended up being extraterrestrial or if it ended up being some government experiment. It's kind of weird. Weird alien, and when I say alien, I mean like the H.R. Geiger type alien in the Ridley Scott movie, kind of, monstrous, devouring alien. E.T. is Ed's second favorite movie. Oh, there you go. It was Joe Fox was saying Wilford. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Horace says The Thing from Another World. That's another excellent old 50s horror movie. Pitch Black's a good movie. Pitch Black is.
Yeah, I've seen that one.
Vin Diesel and Rada Mitchell.
Been a while.
Vehicle. Yeah. They ended up, it's weird because that movie started out as kind of almost like an Aliens type movie, And then by the third one, it was like this big space opera where, he was, the Vin Diesel character became, I don't know, I think by the end he's like an emperor of some alien civilization or something. Or other, when I say alien, other, humanoidish civilization. So yeah, well, that's an awful. We have been through an awful lot of sci-fi. I'm wondering if there's there's anything I'm sure there's lots of
I
iconic
know, I'm
things within the
flipping
mix.
through.
And we haven't even gone to television, of course. I mean, the influence of television on shows like The Intruders, about an
Coneheads.
ET invasion. Conehead, that's a movie. There you go. Or X-Files, of course. I mean, there's been a lot of
Yeah.
ET themed television over the years. Dark
Mars
Skies, it's
Attacks.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Invaders from Mars was a great film as well. Also captured that kind of, 50s Cold War paranoia of things. from
Men
the
in
skies.
Black. Oh gosh. Yeah.
See, it never ends. That's all they've just been
Just flipping
Hollywood's
through it.
just
Stuff
been
I forgot about.
just been filling our heads with all of these alien motives. for
One of the
longest time.
best comedy, alien-esque kind of like Star Trek. There's your TV one. Is Galaxy Quest. I love that movie. Have you
I've
seen
never
Galaxy
seen it.
Quest?
No, I'm
Oh
aware
my
of it,
God,
but
Tim
I've never
Allen's in
seen
it.
it.
You gotta watch it. It is hilarious. I love it. That was in here in this little list of the movies, alien type movies. It's got to be Prometheus. Now that I'm flipping through, I just recognize that character. So that was the one I was thinking of.
Mothman 46 said V, I went through a few other people's suggestions as well, but V was, I suppose, maybe a precursor to a lot of the reptilian conspiracy stuff now. Remember the alien visitors? They were like really lizards under flesh suits, and they'd get torn, and they were pretending they were coming here to save us, but they were really coming here to eat us. You watch that? It was a mini series first. I think Michael Ironside and who was the guy who played? I think the guy what's his name? The guy who played Beastmaster, I believe, another action hero of the 80s. I think that was the actor. I know Ed's a big fan of the Stargate. I've only seen the movie. I've never watched.
I'm
the
a huge
show.
Stargate. I was obsessed with that when that first came out. Oh my gosh.
We got Nancy and Ed both saying at the same. My favorite Martian.
Martian.
Now here, this is fantastic. Mothman 46 is They Live, the greatest movie. Mothman 46, They Live is one of my all-time favorite films. Not only does it star my all-time favorite wrestler, but it's probably the most dead-on political satire I've ever seen. Interestingly, Roddy Piper, before he passed, actually went on the Alex Jones show and said it's pretty much accurate. We're just allegorically talking about the elites that run the world. Like Piper was like 100% into that movie. He really believed in what he was preaching. And the wonderful line in it, what I've come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum. I'm all out of gum or whatever. What a fantastic movie. Goodness gracious. Everybody's got so many. Mork and Mindy. I loved Mork and Mindy Shane back in the day. But it's when we look at this, we can just see again how it's no wonder people believe.
Alf.
Somebody said Alf a minute ago.
Did they? Okay.
Yeah, and I was just scrolling through because I couldn't keep up. Robert Englund was in. Somebody said Robert Englund was in the Mothman 46. That's right. But no wonder people believe in extraterrestrials. I mean, it's the new myth. You would, whether they were real or not, you would have believed in fairies when you lived in the Emerald Isle like 100 years or more ago, perhaps even more recently than that, because all you heard were stories about the fair folk. If when we turn on our television and when we go into a cinemaplex, when so many movies that are imagining mythic non-human but humanoid entities messing around with us, imagining them and paint them as extraterrestrials. It's no wonder when people see, a strange light in the sky or a weird figure next to their bed or a strange little man in the woods. It's no wonder the first thing they jump to is E.T. because that's what they've been culturally programmed to think about. It's not like that. If we said how many fairy movies can people mention, our audience are pretty savvy, so I'm sure they'd mention half a dozen or more, but it wouldn't just be this non-ending stream of of just show after show after show. I mean, we could do this, we could probably do a 6-hour show and not run out of I'm not even kidding.
Third Rock from the Sun, I saw that one. I used to watch that one all the time. That is awesome.
Does that have
you ever see that one?
Is that Alec Baldwin?
Third Rock?
Was Alec Baldwin in that, or am I thinking of something else?
No, what's his name from Harry and the Hendersons?
Oh, John Lithgow was it? John Lithgow?
I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't watch. I don't watch as much TV these days from the last 10 years. but it's just, I mean, yeah,
That was
we
a
could
good
just
TV
do
show.
this again and again. I mean, I can't say thank you enough to everybody who's added their.
Oh, the Jetsons. But that wasn't alien. That was space.
It was
Mysteries.
spacey, but it still gets the idea of, funny flying
Yeah.
ships. And they lied to us in the Jetsons. Look what life was meant to be like by now. Wasn't the Jetsons set around this time?
Well, it's not
like
that far
2020 or
away.
something?
Well,
Yeah, I think
but
we've already passed haven't we already passed the Jetson
maybe.
the Jetson setting time? Maybe.
Hmm.
It was never quite so fantastic as flying cars, and didn't have a nice. Well, I guess there was robot dogs. Isn't there a robot dog in that?
Robot maid. The
A
robots.
robot
are,
maid is there. Okay.
Yeah. And then
That's
everybody
incredibly
had
Zeus
cars
and
that drove them, which that is already a Tesla. So, but not flying though. It's not a flying car, but
No, we never got the flying cars or the jetpacks. When I was a kid, man, I wanted one of them jetpacks. You'd go to like the Royal Easter Show or something, and they'd have, how those in the 70s, there was them jetpack guys. They put on the jetpacks and they'd fly around like in a stadium or something. I thought one
they
day
have stuff like that now, though. I've
but I
seen
don't
people do that.
Where do I get one?
You got you. Okay.
You know what I mean? Yeah, they have.
I've seen people do that over like a lake, so that way they have a nice landing in case they end up falling. But
don't they have some water-based ones? You might have seen the water-based ones, like they squirt out the water. It's like, yeah, they have those.
Yeah, that's what I've seen.
That's still pretty cool.
Okay.
I wouldn't mind. Maybe I need to get one of those for the lake down the road here. Zap
I think
around
you can rent those to some places.
My water jetpack.
Yeah.
We should have had a competition tonight for who could throw out the most UFO and alien oriented shows. I mean, there's a lot in there. I don't know. We would have been splitting the prize, or we would have been painfully counting until the cows came.
Land of the Apes.
Planet.
That's not Planet of the Apes.
No. Well,
but that's in another world, though.
The movie Planet of the Apes is set on Earth in the distant future. So,
what's the TV one I'm thinking of? Or am I just getting things confused?
No. Well, the original Planet of the Apes, the Charlton Heston version, had them go out into space, and then they come back in a far distant future. So at first, they think it's an alien planet, until the very end. The famous reveal of that is that Heston's on a beach with his human savage squeeze that can't talk and is now riding around with him on horseback because all the humans are kind of, can't speak. It's the apes who are intelligent. And then he sees the Statue of Liberty sticking out of the sand, and he realizes that you blew it up, He gets really mad because he realizes there was an atomic configuration which destroyed the planet, and as a result, now the monkeys have inherited it. But the book actually, I think the book, which I haven't read for probably 2 or 3 decades, I think the book has there's alternative Earths. And then I think the astronaut, I think, gets off, but I believe, it's been a long time since I've read it, I think he keeps landing, and it's like the ape virus is spread. Wherever he goes, there's apes now, I think, is the final conceit of it. It's a little bit more.
I just thought of another movie, sorry.
What's another one?
Earth Girls Are Easy. Sorry.
Well, I know that.
I love that movie. What's the movie? Earth Girls Are Easy.
No, I know that. What's the movie called?
Hey,
I know Earth Girls.
You're
not easy. None of our listeners are easy. Any ladies listening out there? I'm not taking a shot. I'm just being.
But that is a hilarious movie. Gina Davis is in it. Jim Carrey.
I don't think I'm aware of it. I don't think I've ever seen it.
And then the
Horace Smith brought up. Sorry, go. I'm sorry. I cut you. Finish your thought.
No, I can't remember his name.
Horace Smith brought up a fantastic movie, which I think was originally a black and white BBC serial in the UK, and that's Quatermass and the Pit, which was also called, I'm sure Horace will know what it was called. It also had another alternative title, like, I don't know, 6 million miles to Earth or something. Like, it had some number in there, but it's essentially, again, ancient astronaut theory. There's all these weird psychic manifestations in this dig, and they realize what it is this ancient buried spacecraft with these bug-like aliens in it, and somehow their psychic or their technology has been spitting out all of this weird energy. Fantastic movie. I think the film was made by Hammer Studios, the great British horror studio. But I think originally the Quatermass stuff was I think there were a number of them, and they were like BBC serials, like TV shows. Here you go. Thank you, Horace. 5 million years to Earth. Yeah, it's something like that. I can't remember, but that could very well be it. Some title like that. Ed says Mars needs women. There's another one. Don't forget the one with Jane Fonda, Barbarella.
Yeah.
That's a sci-fi though, but does Barbarella have any alien stuff? I can't remember. Body Snatchers or Invasion of the Body Snatchers is definitely a horror sci-fi, and they've made that story now. It's got to be 4, 5, 6 times. So there was the original black and white one, then there was the fantastic 70s adaptation of it. I think there was one somewhat recently with like Nicole Kidman and Daniel Craig or somebody in it, right? But there's been other versions, like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. There's been strict adaptations, and there's been other movies riffing on that idea that, some alien life form takes over human beings, and things that look like us aren't us. It's fantastic.
Black-eyed children.
Well, that's another thing altogether. Again, it's another where we go. We could spin on black-eyed children now.
Yeah.
But I think we should probably get ready to close it out, unless there's anything else you wanted to say. We should thank all of you for being with us tonight and being with us through the last couple of years. And I hope that as I said again, I hope you all join us next week at 10 p.m. Central, so an hour earlier, on the Untold Radio Network. Go down into the comments, or rather go into the show notes, or the section just below this video, wherever you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, and you'll be able to find the Untold Radio Network links to YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. It'll stream on all 3 of those. So subscribe or follow, and come and join us next week for our very first episode on Untold Radio Network.
Yeah, we can post it on the Talking Weird too, right?
We will post the links to it on Talking Weird every show every week. So if you're a member of that Facebook page, we'll post the link from Untold Radio. But go and subscribe to Untold Radio, because we're one of, I think, 7 shows launching, and I have another show there as well with Jason McLean, Mysterious Library, and there's a bunch of really cool shows. Of course, the flagship show is Doug Hajicek's own show, which he does with his son Alex, which is called Untold Radio. That's a great show. I think that's every Wednesday night. Anyway, if you subscribe, you'll see a bunch of shows. I think there's a show every day is what it's going to be. So it's like Coast to Coast AM, but with a different host every day, which is kind of cool. That's me living my Art Bell fantasy.
Yes, I know.
Tell myself that. But no, I'm so excited to be working with Doug. We both are. Any final words from you, baby, before we sign out?
Just keep it weird.
Let's just show everybody nights first. And we'll say thank you, Ed. Thank you, Shane. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Joe.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Horace. Thank you. I'm sure I've missed some people. Nancy, thank you. Mothman 46, of course. Thank you. My mother and stepfather in Australia who watch loyally every week. Thank you both for watching. Yeah, thanks to everybody. We'll see you at 10 p.m. Central next week. And until then, you're right. Keep it weird.
Keep it weird.
Thank you for joining us tonight. If you're interested in checking out more episodes, you can find us at talkingweird.com. If you haven't already, please like the show on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Talking Weird Podcast. Make sure you never miss an episode by subscribing to Talking Weird. We're available on most podcast platforms and YouTube. And if you do enjoy the show, please leave us a review. Dean and I would really appreciate it. Until then, stay safe.